Wimbledon 2022 is going to be an exhibition. No rankings points on offer on the ATP side. Curious to see if the WTA follows suit. I don't have an overarching cohesive opinion on this, but I do have a couple of different takeaways. First off, everybody's going to play Wimbledon. That's the first thing I want to say. Financially, it's a big deal for players. It makes a huge difference. All four majors are this way. And that's what matters most for the players. I mean, the only reason players care so much about rankings is so that they can get into the tournaments that they want to get into because of money. I mean, let's just remember what these guys play for. They're not playing for free, right? The glory counts also. Like, for the top players, the players who can win, that's not most of the field, but they still want to win Wimbledon. And for everybody else, I mean, it's still playing Wimbledon. So the tournament's going to be okay. And I just want to throw that out there first. I think it's not going to make that much of a difference for us watching, and I don't think anybody's going to skip it. So that's the first thing. Second, I think that this decision is as much about the tours taking power as it is protecting the integrity of the ranking system. The ATP, for the most part, has said this is about fairness to the Russian and Belarusian players who are going to suffer in the rankings as a result of not being allowed to play these events. I don't think... My hunch is that the ATP doesn't care that deeply about Russian and Belarusian players to actually go to this length. I think what they do care deeply about is sending a message that the slams can't do whatever they want. That they actually need to cooperate, that they need to communicate, and at the end of the day, they are making a decision about their tournament that wasn't agreed upon at all by anybody else. The ATP didn't agree. The WTA didn't agree. The ITF didn't agree. None of the other three slams have done the same thing. I assume that means they don't agree. So with the ATP going to this length to take away rankings points, they're basically saying, hey, you can't do whatever you want here. You need us as well. This is not everyone for themselves, as it kind of is in tennis usually. But the ATP is pushing against that, and they're within their rights to do that because the agreement is Wimbledon. You get to be a part of our ranking system because you play by our rules. And part of our rules is that the entry into your tournament is based on our ranking system. Now, seeds are another story. Wildcards are another story. Rules in terms of the format is another story. But in terms of who can play Wimbledon, well, that is based on our ranking system. And if you hold up that end of the bargain, then you can use our ranking system and you can be a part of our tour. And you are, Wimbledon is a part of the tour. There are no events scheduled during Wimbledon, for example. And these are all things that is kind of while they're independent, Wimbledon and the ATP completely independent, it is a collaboration here. And I think the ATP is sending a very strong reminder to Wimbledon of that very fact. So, in that sense, between the fact that the ATP is fundamentally against the decision, the fact that they are correct about protecting the integrity of the ranking system to a certain extent, that yes, it would be Russian and Belarusian players would suffer from this based on something that the ATP basically is against. I understand. Like, I understand from their perspective why they did this. And I know that if you're someone who agrees with the Wimbledon decision, then you're definitely going to be against what the tour did. I also understand that there's a middle ground, and arguably the ATP just made this worse, because now you're bringing more players into this mess, and the damage is becoming more and more collateral, where you at first had a situation where only Russian and Belarusian players were really going to be affected by this whole thing. And now everybody's going to be affected by this whole thing. So that part of the decision I don't have a problem with. Here's the part that I do. Here's the part that doesn't sit right with me. What doesn't sit right with me is that players who did well at Wimbledon last year are going to lose all their points, and there's nothing they can do about it, which to me feels much worse, much harder to accept than players going into a tournament knowing their results are not going to count, agreeing to play the tournament, and that's that. Like, if a player went deep at Wimbledon 2022 and it didn't help them, would that kind of stink? Yeah, but they knew that going in. But something about the retroactive, something about players dropping in the rankings because they're losing points that they had no chance to defend. It just doesn't feel right. Just doesn't. So for Hubert Hurkacz and Matteo Berrettini and Novak Djokovic, for example, for Marton Fucsovics, who's complained publicly that he's going to drop outside the top 100. It's going to have, look, you have different levels to it. I actually think the players who I think even in Fucovic's case, it's actually more significant because it's actually going to affect his career. A drop like that in the rankings affects what tournaments he can get into. For Berrettini and Hurkacz, though, it's going to be a significant drop for them because so many of their rankings points are tied up in Wimbledon. Because quite frankly, they haven't. Hurkacz has been better this year, actually, but a significant amount of their points are tied up in Wimbledon. For Djokovic, it's kind of a different thing. It's more about the history books. Novak it's not going to affect him much as far as he's not going to drop that much. It's just obviously when it comes to the number one and the weeks at number one and the record holder for weeks at number one, you're just dealing with the history books and perhaps having an effect on that. So kind of a different deal for Djokovic than it would be for Fucsovics. But regardless, I would have liked to see them freeze, and I would still like to see them just freeze the 2021 results. Punish Wimbledon by saying your 2022 tournament is not going to count. But you must allow players, you cannot take away rankings points from players in a punitive fashion, right, without letting them defend it. I guess that's the difference for me. If you are not allowing players to win points, that's one thing. It doesn't feel so unjust. What does feel unjust is the loss of points. That's just what doesn't feel right to me. A couple of other things I want to throw out there. First of all, it's become clear that the government kind of pressured Wimbledon into this decision, making the LTA somewhat of a victim here. So I did want to set the record straight on that. I know in my original video on this topic that I didn't, that information wasn't really available. So I was really looking at this situation more of a Wimbledon issue. I think for Wimbledon, they feel like they're probably getting squeezed on a couple of ends here. They have on one end the governing bodies of tennis that don't approve of the decision that they've made. And then I think on the other end, they've had the UK government giving them, according to Wimbledon itself, putting a lot of pressure on them to make this decision. So I think that's a tough decision for Wimbledon. My last thing is that the rankings are not going to reflect grass at all now, for the most part. There's no Masters event on the surface. You have the 500 in Queens. I mean, you have like Halle and Stuttgart. It's Stuttgart, right? Yeah. I think those are 250s. There's not a lot of rankings points on grass, so it basically takes it completely out of the equation, just out of the ranking system, for the most part, which is crazy. The reason why grass was a legitimate thing in the rankings was because of Wimbledon. So that's another thing. And by the way, there will be rankings points for events that are taking place in the UK. Russians and Belarusians are not allowed, but they're ATP events. And that's very interesting. Now, first of all, that supports the first thing I said, which is that the ATP is not so much concerned with justice for Russian and Belarusians, but more so concerned with putting their foot down and sending a message to the Slams and Wimbledon. Because why wouldn't they do this for all tournaments? Well, what they have said is that the other tournaments, if they did not allow rankings points, they would suffer completely. Nobody would play them. I actually think that's true, because there are other options. There are other tournaments to be played during these weeks that aren't in the UK. So nobody's going to play Queens when there's other tournaments to play with rankings points. I mean, I think some players will go and play a challenger rather than play a tournament with no rankings points, because again, the rankings are important to a lot of players, and the prize money would not be enough in that case. The difference with Wimbledon is that there are no other events during Wimbledon. There's nowhere else for anybody to go. So, and with the prize money, you know that Wimbledon's going to be fine. Those other events wouldn't be fine. And the thing is, if the other events are not fine, well, that actually hurts the ATP. They'd be shooting themselves in the foot, because these tournaments pay a hefty fee for an ATP license to host the events. So the ATP needs those events to be healthy financially for their best interest, which is kind of, shaky, because that's reason to question the decisions. I think that, that's reason to question the motive of the ATP to only enforce their conviction for Wimbledon. I think the best argument in defense of the ATP for this is that Russians and Belarusians, because there are other events, from an integrity standpoint, they can just play those other events, and they actually won't really fall behind the field in terms of their opportunities to earn rankings points. And that is why, one of the reasons why the ATP has justified allowing rankings points to be in play for the LTA events, the UK events, before Wimbledon. So that's another interesting part of this. So yeah, as I said, just throwing a bunch of takeaways your way. No real cohesive overarching take, but yeah, those are my thoughts on rankings points being pulled for Wimbledon 2022 on the men's side. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.